joining us. Again, thank you for joining us. Here's a quick brief overview. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing so that Ron can take over his hosting duties.
All right. Thanks everybody for attending. I guess I was thinking I was just going to speak for a little bit and be part of a larger group here. So I will try to do the best I can without prepared remarks. So I am Ron Bula, and we have a farm, a family farm west of Baraboo. My wife is Maureen. She was a school teacher for about 31 years, retired, and now is farming here with me. And I have, in a prior work experience, been a loan officer with the Farm Credit System for almost 40 years. And I worked in Sauk, in Columbia, and Marquette, and Juneau counties in Wisconsin here. So got a little bit of experience, went through the severe farm crisis in the 1980s, and that was probably the most challenging time in my career, and the riskiest time, honestly, because people were so stressed out. And then there were two other times in my lending career that it was very, very stressful in the farm community. And when I exited, we were experiencing another long-term trough in farm earnings. Now, last year we had record payments from the federal government. Over $40 billion got transferred. If that hadn't happened, there'd probably be a lot more for sale signs in the country. But that, coupled with higher prices for commodities, seems to be improving the attitude of farmers just lately. But when I left the Farm Credit, when I retired, I joined an organization called SWIG, which was a group of Sauk County farmers. It's called Sauk Soil and Water Improvement Group. And it's a like-minded group of people that are trying to practice regenerative agriculture and improve the soils, reduce our dependence upon purchased inputs, and do some things like rotational grazing of cattle. So it's a little different way of farming. And there is more and more emphasis on this, especially going into this next administration. They're going to view farmers as the foot soldiers in trying to sequester carbon and improve our soils, which are rapidly depleting. So even though we might not have direct payments for just having a heartbeat and a farmer cap, we might have payments from the federal government for practicing things like no-till and cover cropping and leaving the ground always covered, things like that, or maybe rotational grazing, because you will add tremendous amounts of carbon back into the soil and improve your fertility if you do these practices. In those 40 years that I was at Farm Credit, the most challenging thing was understanding people. If all you could do is put everything down into an algorithm and ratios, you could easily use a computer to make all the loan decisions. But the craft of it was really working with people and seeing what was going to be a good loan and work for the people and for your organization. So that being said, we would analyze financial statements and talk to people at great lengths. And here's a couple of observations real quick. It won't take me an hour to tell you my 40 years of experience. But the one thing about the most successful farmers, one of them is that number one, they were always asking questions. Some of the most successful people uh, would call me about things, and these are people that some of them had started from scratch and were multi millionaires, and yet they were calling me about, should I do this or should I do that? Basically using me as a sounding board because they knew I didn't know anything. But at the same time, they wanted to hear it back and kind of think it through. Um, some of the worst farmers that I worked with, they knew everything. I mean, it was frustrating because they wouldn't listen to anything. Um, there's an old saying, one of our SWIG members has said is, you know, you can tell an old German from a mile away, but when he's up close, you can't tell him anything. And I saw some of that. But these these people that are unwilling to get input, usually we're so determined to go their path, and if they're right, good on them. But often as not, they weren't, and that led them into a dead end. Um, the other thing is the successful farmers always accepted personal responsibility. It was, if something went wrong, I don't care if it was things way beyond their control, like the markets crashed or whatever. They always said, you know what, I should have sold more in advance. I should have had a better marketing plan. I could manage risk. Never said, well, there's no way that, I did anything wrong here. It's always somebody else's fault, and they're stealing it from me or something. It was that denial of personal responsibility that was defining between the guys that were, successful and the ones that weren't. And another trait I would say is communication, especially with their team members on their farm. How many times the wife didn't know what was going on, or what the goals of, you know, either one of them was. And that was really frustrating. And you saw marriages break up, and you saw, a lot of stress in the families because, and these were even on some people that were very, very successful, great farmers. But because they didn't communicate with each other, um, they would crash and burn. And the biggest killer, because we would screen our loans pretty tight, and we kind of knew how to, look at um, the ratios to manage risk for our lending institution. But it was human frailty that would bring the loans down. And it would be, divorce would be one, that'd be number one. Sickness would be number two, mental sickness or health. Um, I guess the next one would be, like despondency, people just becoming so depressed because of maybe a death in the family, or they're being sick. And all those stressors were the things that would kill loans. But if people would stick together and had a decent plan and would work with each other, I was always amazed at how much farmers could overcome despite low earnings. And you'd wonder where it's coming from. They'd pay down their debt and they'd pay off their farms, and um, after a few years they're looking relatively strong. They just put their head down and were so determined they were never going to lose. But I think they had some serious discussions behind the scenes, and really, understood what they wanted to accomplish. Um, so when you look at your balance sheet at the end of the year, everybody should do a balance sheet at the end of the year. And if you have a farm or a business, and you'll have your assets on your left side and your liabilities on your right side, and at the bottom, below the liabilities, is something called your net worth. And there's going to be ups and downs in every business, especially farming. Um, but at the end of each year, if you see a trend where your net worth is declining, that means you are losing money. And if you are losing money consistently, you need to determine that that business is stealing from you. It's taking your hard earned equity and you're giving it up. And don't blame it on your lender. The lender is there to, number one, protect his depositors. It isn't his money that he's loaning usually. It's somebody else's money, and he's got to protect them first, and the institution second, and lastly, it's the farmer. But most people who are in that business, they really do not want to do any harm. They want the farmer to succeed and achieve his dreams. So um, sometimes they get wrapped up in it a little too much, um, and all of a sudden, they give the farmer, they you don't give them money, you loan them money. And just because farmers can get the money doesn't mean they should take it. So um, that's, make sure you get a second opinion sometimes. So
All right.
that's about all I have to say.
All right. Thanks, Ron, for that insight. And great segue into some of our upcoming topics we have as well during this meeting today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Project Recovery Group. I'm not sure who's speaking and who's sharing, so I'll let you guys do the introductions for yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie. Here with me today is Richard and Stacy. We are outreach workers for Project Recovery Wisconsin. Today, we want to talk to you about some of the impacts the COVID-19 pandemic is having upon individuals and communities. All of us have experienced some kind of impact, from the way we go about our daily routines to changes in family schedules and health. In addition to talking about common reactions to the pandemic, we would also like to talk about ways to cope with stress caused by the pandemic, as well as our free and anonymous resource, Project Recovery, that is available to assist individuals and families throughout Wisconsin.
Thanks for the introduction, Julie. As Julie mentioned, we're going to start off by telling you a bit about Project Recovery and how and when the program is implemented to help those affected by a disaster. We will go over the definition of a disaster and talk about common reactions to a disaster. And then lastly, we'll talk about resilience and self-care strategies that could potentially help anyone during the pandemic. So Project Recovery is a FEMA-funded outreach program, and funding becomes available to a state when a major disaster is declared by the governor and federal assistance is requested. Once a presidential declaration is made, the Stafford Act is activated to provide assistance, which includes crisis counseling funding. Any state, tribe, or territory can then send a grant application to FEMA requesting Project Recovery assistance. Local agencies hire, train, and deploy outreach workers to the affected area. And currently, all 50 states have active Project Recovery teams in place. The majority of the Wisconsin Project Recovery outreach workers are working remotely due to the nature of this disaster. And as we mentioned, Project Recovery promotes resilience, empowerment, and recovery. This program is designed to support and strengthen community systems. It does not replace existing systems. Project Recovery works by training neighbors to respond effectively to their neighbors who are experiencing stress related to a disaster.
So I'd like to share a little bit about Project Recovery's outreach services. They are free and anonymous. Outreach workers focus on helping people identify their strengths. Our team deeply cares about farmers. I can testify to that. They truly care about farmers. We all do. And we are familiar with agriculture and the stresses that exist on farms. The outreach program is designed to strengthen community support systems and draw on people's natural resilience. And we'll talk about resilience later on in the slides too. We work on a neighbors helping neighbors model. We carry our work in non-traditional settings. You can make a call to us in the comfort of your home, which is really nice. So we're going to talk about what is a disaster. The definition of a disaster is a natural or human-caused occurrence that causes human suffering. A disaster creates a collective need that overwhelms local resources and requires additional assistance. It's important to note here that COVID-19 is a different sort of disaster than a tornado or flood. So a tornado is more like localized, right? And it's acute and its impact happens quickly. While the pandemic impacts the entire global population, it's more chronic and the impact happens over a longer duration period. The pandemic and the natural disaster do have a commonality. They both affect the general population and depletes our resources. Project Recovery does help to offset the impacts from the COVID-19 by providing emotional support, stress management strategies, and connections to resources.
As we alluded to on the previous slide, every disaster is different, and yet anyone who experiences a disaster will be impacted by it in some way. Further, trauma affects both individuals and the community. Often we see people pull together during and after a disaster. For example, it is not unusual to see people offering food, clothing, or other goods to both neighbors and strangers who have been affected by a disaster. Common reactions to a disaster include feeling moved to help others in the aftermath of a disaster and a heightened sense of shared fate. Other common disaster reactions include stress and grief. We'll say more about this in a few minutes. In addition to there being a range of predictable human reactions to a disaster, experience with past disasters indicates that people's natural ability to adapt and change will support individual and community recovery. Part of what makes the COVID-19 pandemic different from other sorts of disasters like floods and tornadoes is the scope of who is affected. In this case, everyone on the planet has experienced some sort of impact. However, because we have not all been impacted in the same way or the same time, we may not always be aware of how the stress we are feeling is related to the pandemic, or how it may be affecting our relationships, bodies, and ways of coping. Further, as the pandemic goes on, how we have personally been impacted may be changing. Whereas urban areas saw many cases of illnesses early on, it's only more recently that rural communities have started to see rising case rates. Part of what this means is that we must continue to adapt to an ever-changing circumstance.
Next, we will discuss the risk factor population exposure model, which is also referred to as the ripple effect model. Think of throwing a rock into a pond. Point A is where your rock strikes the water. Point B, C, D, and E are the ripple effects that rock impact leaves. The closer you are to ripple A, the greater the effect. Let me explain the ripple effect model in a story. Jason is 55 years old, married with 2 children. He has a successful carpenter business for 30 years in the town he grew up in. Along comes the pandemic. Ripple A, Jason falls ill with COVID and dies. His death is mostly impacted by his spouse and children. Ripple B, his coworkers are impacted, and they are also concerned they have been exposed to the virus. Ripple C, Jason's extended family and friends are saddened by his death. Ripple D, Jason has 10 employees and they are now out of a job. Ripple E, Jason's death largely affected many people in the community he lived in. Given the nature of the pandemic, the degrees of the impact can vary amongst individuals. There are 4 common reaction categories people experience in a disaster. They are emotional, physical, cognitive, and behavioral.
So let's go into each of those a little more in depth. Many people are experiencing a range of unexpected emotions that may not attribute to the pandemic, but that are in part the response to the pandemic. For example, many people report sadness or grief at everything that is different. This can be true for people who have had loved ones die from COVID or some other cause, especially if their traditional grieving practices couldn't be observed. It can also be true for people who have missed other sorts of routines and rites of passage like proms and graduations. Others report heightened uncertainty and difficulty knowing what the right thing to do is. Feeling irritable or even angry over seemingly small issues has been reported by many. Taking time to recognize and honor these hard emotions can be an important first step in finding productive ways of dealing with them. It's okay to recognize that we feel uncertainty and anger, that so many things are out of our control. An example of my own emotional impact is that I haven't been able to go to any of my brother's varsity basketball games because there's only a limited amount of tickets, only 2 per family. This makes me feel very angry. In addition to emotional effects, some of the stress we are experiencing due to the pandemic may show up in our bodies. Tension-related headaches, sleep disruptions, and physical exhaustion, which are all common complaints. We may not even realize that things like headaches and insomnia are related to the pandemic, but changes in our ordinary routines like canceled school and community events, juggling kids and work at home, navigating public spaces in new ways. All of these can contribute to an increased muscle tension, sleep disruption, and an overall feeling of exhaustion. If you have been affected in any of these ways, it is important to develop strategies to counter these physical effects. Taking a few minutes to focus on breathing deeply, going for a short, brisk walk, or drinking some calming herbal tea before bed. Any of these can help your body dispel the physical stressors you are experiencing due to the pandemic. Now, I'd like to invite you guys to a brief exercise with me called box breathing. So let's start. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Now that's just a little trick that you could use anytime during the day. Taken together, the emotional and physical effects of the pandemic may lead to cognitive impacts as well. Common impacts include difficulty concentrating, difficulty making decisions, difficulty setting priorities. All of these cognitive impacts can be related to stress reactions that have become entrenched. If you have noticed significant changes in physical or cognitive functioning in yourself or a loved one, checking in with your physician may be warranted.
Sorry about that. Got to unmute myself here. Due to the safer at home order and social distancing changes, such as attending church, community events, and family gatherings, have required different alternatives. According to PubMed.gov, during the COVID-19 pandemic, 46.8% of the subjects reported an increased dependence on internet use. Teenage gaming and online bullying have also increased. There's also been an increased use of alcohol. And sadly, we are seeing a surge in drug overdoses and suicide. Another behavior is called doom scrolling. I don't know if any of you have heard this term, but this is where a person scrolls and surfs social media news sites for extended period of time. This has resulted in individuals experiencing increased anxieties, fear, and we've also seen work and sleep disturbances in them. Project recovery outreach workers provide healthy alternatives that can direct others to online support groups and other treatment options. In addition to individual impacts, it's important to recognize that as a society, we are experiencing collective trauma. Collective trauma happens when a large group of people are affected by the same event. The group may experience the event firsthand or experience it through reports in the media. Examples include natural disasters like floods, tornadoes, widespread community violence, political upheaval, and pandemics. Collective trauma takes many forms, but in all cases, collective trauma creates stress that members of the impacted group can't escape or make any sense of. People who are largely affected by collective trauma are those who are in the helping roles. Professionals who are trying to balance personal challenges, such as being impacted by the traumatic event, or others who have pre-existing behavioral health issues and social injustices. They may be struggling to maintain a balance or a neutral perspective that's not based on their own experience. The stress of these personal challenges can show up in like panic attacks, nightmares, depression, anxiety. It's important for those who are helping others to be assisted and for them to know, hey, it's okay to receive help. Project Recovery helps individuals and communities to develop healthy coping strategies.
So far, we've talked a lot about the different ways that disasters can impact individuals and communities by focusing on the emotional, cognitive, physical, behavioral impacts that a disaster has on people affected by them. But all these different impacts have in common is that they are all stress reactions. So what is stress? Stress is a natural response to a challenge or threat. In this way, stress can be positive or negative. If you take on a new project or business enterprise, you likely will feel some amount of stress. That positive stress can be motivating and help you to focus on the next steps that will bring the project to fruition and make the enterprise successful. Positive stress leads people to adapt and develop new coping skills. In this way, your perceptions about your situation can be key to the outcome. If you see the good to be gained from the new challenge and are able to honestly assess your existing resources and coping strategies, that will allow you to rise to the challenge. You'll likely be motivated to develop new skills that will help you to succeed. However, it is also important to note that left unaddressed over time, acute or situational stress can also change into chronic stress and lead to physical, cognitive, emotional, and behavior distress. In what follows, we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use to prevent the negative impacts that may come about from dealing with chronic stress. So what is resilience? One of the important skills needed to overcome any stressful situation or challenge is that of resilience. Resilience may or may not be a word familiar to you. Resilience is a valuable skill that, when strengthened, allows an individual to persist in the face of adversity. A resilient person is one who is able to adapt even when faced with tragedy, threats, or other significant sources of stress. Resiliency is sometimes compared to a rubber band. Rubber bands come in all sizes and thickness. They can be stretched repeatedly and yet are able to spring back to their original shape. They have flexibility. They bounce back. Resilient humans are sort of like rubber bands. They can be stretched, sometimes repeatedly. They also have the ability to bounce back. In this way, resilience is a quality that can lead to personal growth as one finds a way to cope with difficult situations.
So here's some good news. Resiliency is a skill that can be developed. 3 important strategies that support resiliency are: First, find ways to make connections with friends, family, and community members. Positive connections with others can help you move through adversity and can provide you with important resources that make adapting possible. Second, identify and work toward achievable goals can help you overcome challenges. I've seen others during this time enroll in college, take a class online, or start new healthy eating lifestyle during this time. And third, practice self-care is considered an essential business. We live in a society that sometimes prioritizes helping others over meeting our own needs. The reality is, in order to be our best selves, we need to make sure we are giving ourselves enough rest, nutrition, and support. So, according to Mental Health America, 71% of people surveyed turn to family and friends in times of stress. Further boosting your well-being by surrounding yourself with coworkers who get your humor. Okay. A friend who encourages you and a spouse who hugs you can relieve a significant amount of stress and provide that human touch that we also need. Take a moment to ask yourself this: what family members and friends do you feel you are comfortable with? You feel safe to tell them anything. They take your concerns seriously. They can help you resolve problems. They make you feel valued. Humans are social creatures. We crave feeling supported, valued, and connected.
Research shows that people without goals are not as successful as they would like to be. Why is this? Well, goals give you momentum to push through adversity that you face while chasing your dreams and aspirations. It's easier to set long-term goals first and then build in short-term goals to reach your long-term goals. Mountain climber is going to break a mountain into portions of a climb with short-term goals and needs to meet those goals. We want to try to approach our long-term goals the same way. This clever acronym, SMART, helps you build strong goals that can be effectively tracked, achieved, and surpassed. If you are creating a SMART goal and you can't check out all of the boxes, you might need to reevaluate what you're trying to accomplish. Creating a list has been proven to give people a better sense of direction and focus. A list enables us to detach ourselves from our emotions and focus more objectively. Task prioritizing is a valuable tool for choosing how to reach short-term goals that can be for a meeting, a day of work, or a task at hand, like changing a tire on your vehicle, or even fixing something that is broken. Practicing good self-care can help you be more effective in the things you do. Self-care takes many different forms. We have shared some examples of the different areas that can be positively affected by various self-care strategies. For some, it can be as minor as setting aside time to relax, reading the newspaper, or making time for at least one meal a day with your family.
This is a Facebook post from our Project Recovery Wisconsin page. This is an example of a 5-minute self-care option that can provide you with stress relief. The second idea is listening to your favorite song. Richard, you told me before, what is your favorite song again?
When there's something strange in the neighborhood, who are you gonna call? Ghostbusters!
Project Recovery. Who are you going to call? Project Recovery. Now we know what Richard's favorite song is, and we added a little humor for more relief.
You can reach Project Recovery in the following ways. Our toll-free number, 1-833-FARM-HELP. Dialing 1211, ask for Project Recovery, our website, and Facebook. Also, the circle above is called a QR code. If you use your smartphone's camera to focus Over the circle, a pop-up will appear that will take you directly to our Project Recovery website for farmers and farm workers. We'd also like to remind you that Project Recovery outreach workers are available to talk to any Wisconsin resident struggling with the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. Our team is specially trained to help Wisconsin farmers, farm workers, and their families. And remember, we are free and anonymous service. At this time, we would like to open up for questions and discussions. What stood out today about our discussion of disaster reactions? What have you noticed in your own life? What strategies for managing stress have you tried and had success with? Or any other questions?
So this is Amanda. I'm a human development and relationships educator with Sauk County, and I teach mindfulness. So some of the techniques that we use in that class include guided meditation, because some people find meditation difficult, and I'm one of them. Sitting quietly is hard. But guided meditation is sometimes that's helpful if you find it difficult to kind of just hold space for quietness. And there's all kinds of apps for that that help with that. And also there's some that kind of talk you through. And that could be annoying if you don't like the sound of the voice. There are also like music meditation, and that can be nice because then the sound is consistent and relaxing.
Thank you for that, Amanda. I agree with that. I find guided meditation to be easier to follow. And I think it's something we can also add to our list of having for people to direct them into healthy coping strategies.
All right. Are there any other comments, questions for the Project Recovery team members? I can't see everyone, so I don't know if anyone's got anything. If not, Amanda, do you want to pull up that poll quick and then I'll get going on my section?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, demographics. We are a federally funded program through Extension. So the demographic data just helps show that we are working with a wide range of audience members and really trying to reach out and work with all in our communities. So if you could just take a few seconds to input that information, even if you want to put prefer not to respond, we'd appreciate it. Again, this is anonymous. It's just to show that we're reaching out. So we appreciate that. I think I got closed down too quick. I'm gonna pull it up one more time. There we go. If you could just fill that out one more time, it shut down early on us. All right, and as we get going, my name is Elena Voss. I'm the agriculture educator for Juneau and Sauk counties for the UW-Madison Division of Extension. The presentation I'm presenting today was created by John Shutsky. I had the opportunity to share this program with him at the Wisconsin Fruit and Veggie Growers in 2020. So looking forward to the opportunity to share it with you today. So with that, we will all are good on the demographics. Oh, got a couple more fallen in. All right. Well, thank you everyone for filling that out. Since a lot of it was covered and we're running a bit late, I might jump through a little bit quicker than normal on this presentation, so bear with me. And get my screen to react. Okay, so first off, I want to point out, if you have not gone to our Resilient Farms, Families, Businesses, and Communities website, or responding to stress, we do have a website that you can go to. It's got great information, and you'll hear me reference back to it for the different materials. So you can find that at farms.extension.wisc.edu at farm stress. And it kind of gives you that update. And there's four main topics they kind of break that down into. So how does stress affect the brain and body, communicating in times of stress, stress management, and your farm future. So really trying to take a peek at those different categories in our life and being able to take a chance to read through some of those articles and resources that are available through this website. There's also a Facebook page if you're interested in finding it that way as well. So you know, stress, we all deal with it. The project recovery team did a great job sharing that as well. But there's a difference. There's a difference between that short-term stress, that acute stress, and then that chronic and that long-term stress that we really have to deal with. So it's kind of like an on-ramp, you know, we get that short-term stress and then it builds up to that long-term. But what are we actually seeing as we go through this? It's the cycle of chronic stress. So you'll see that there's impacts, just as Project Recovery mentioned, there's impacts of how the stress is on our brain, which can then lead to bad decisions, leading to consequences of those bad decisions, and then more fuel to that response. So, you know, everything kind of builds up after a while because of that chronic stress. So being able to find a way to make changes to those problems that may affect us and can lead to those bad decisions. So, and some of these changes in our life due to chronic stress are, you know, our health, our emotions, our relationships with individuals. There we go. And as we kind of talk about the stress, you know, one way to think about it is we all have drove tractors. We know what they are. We know how they work. And you can remember getting told, you know, throttle back, throttle back. Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to work on throttling back that stress and really trying to take advantage of the opportunity to, you know, take that a little bit, ease up some of that stress that we're putting on ourselves. So when we notice this picture, what are we seeing? Does anyone's stress level go up on this? I know mine would if I was that animal getting attacked. And this shows that, you know, fight or flight, and this is what happens when we're in stressful situations. You know, stress can be for both critters on this picture. You know, you can really have stress. You're trying to stay alive. You're trying to stay out of the grasp of that cheetah. But at the same time, that cheetah, as much as it may be fun chasing after these animals, that's its lunch, you know, it's its supper, it's its meals to keep it going. So it's, you know, it's a stressful situation for both, trying to make, you know, their lives continue going. And as we come to this picture, and it's a picture of, you know, the wire board back in the day. You know, as we process our information, we have the 5 senses, and, you know, little things can make our brains react differently. So you might feel that buzz in your pocket, so you feel, and then you answer the phone and you hear, but then you really have, when you start thinking about what's getting said, you know, perhaps that loan officer is the one on the phone with you and they're wanting to talk to you. You know, that automatically gets that fight or flight. What's going on? What's wrong? Why? And trying to determine it. Or perhaps you're heading to bed and you look out your window after getting a cup of water at the sink in the kitchen and look out and your barn's on fire. You know, you're going to have fight or flight action. You're going to call 911. You're going to try to get cattle out of the way. Do whatever you need to do to try to protect and, you know, thrive from this horrible situation. You're going to try to find ways to continue on. So those are all senses, and the part of us that's making that work is the hypothalamus, which is our brain switchboard. So just like our wire board there for the operator, it integrates and routes and inputs from the five senses. And then when a threat is present, it releases the CRH hormone and starts the process of reacting. So then that leads us to the pituitary base. So the hypothalamus, it creates and reacts. Then it leads us to the pituitary. It's at the base of your brain, and it's about only the size of a pea. Like a conductor, it regulates the rest of our endocrine system, and also releases that ACTH into our bloodstream. So as that continues on, that leads to the adrenal glands, and that's the top of the kidneys, and that's signaled by the ACTH to release that adrenaline and cortisol, and it fuels the outward signs of stress that we feel and see. So really getting into that part about, you know, how stress is working and why. So just like the dog and the cat, you know, fight or flight, individuals such as police officers are also trained to how to react so that if they ever get into a situation, they don't react with fear and freeze up in a situation, in a very stressful situations like they are. Kind of like what this dog is, you know, it's scared, it jumps back, really trying to create and keep that going. Just as Project Recovery mentioned, you know, sometimes it does affect our brain with stress. And part of that is the front part of our brain. That's where we have the thoughtful, the decision making. It's like a mental scratch pad for us. So we're, you know, how we scratch down and take notes. This really is affecting that part of our brain and how we need to be in full function to be able to make everything work. And these are just the beginning parts, you know, in that acute stress, that short term. So as you look at it, stress really does help us grow. It's a part of any change. I don't know why my slide's acting up, so I apologize. But stress really does help us grow. It's part of any change. You know, kids going off to school, transitioning the farm to your youth, retiring, whatever it might be, there's always something that's going to cause stress. Even if it's just a little bit, it's a good thing. It helps make those changes in us. It helps us grow. It helps us learn. So being able to know the difference between that good stress and that bad stress, and really being able to take a look at that. You can't live in stress 24/7 though. We all have receptors that are in our bodies, kind of like Velcro, that grab that cortisol and tell the brain to throttle back or turn up or turn down the heat in your house, just like a thermostat. It's telling, you know, those receptors are really telling us what's going on and how to react and calm down, basically. But over time, those receptors, just like Velcro, are going to wear out. You know, you use Velcro so often, it's going to wear out and become fewer in numbers. So we really want to take caution and be able to know when we're reaching those limits and be able to throttle back and take care of ourselves. So again, we talked about a little bit about how, you know, it can affect our hippocampus and how that holds our long-term memories, how we don't have that scratch pad anymore, so it's not properly working, and we can't use that to help, you know, us make decisions, which can lead us to making some bad decisions because we're not fully thinking in our best functioning brain as we kind of go through this. So just a brief overview. The higher the stress, you can have issues with high cholesterol, you can have heart issues such as a heart attack or a stroke, and also your body's not quite working properly, which can lead to diabetes. It's not functioning, it's not breaking those nutrients down that we're taking in properly, causing issues such as that. And also just that big, you know, that worry of having clogged arteries, especially going on in your system. In the brain, you're going to notice a lot with depression and anxiety and how those are interconnected too. These symptoms can make your brain want to shut down. You lose hope. You feel like you have no hope. You can't do anything. You just are shutting yourself down, keeping yourself in. You don't want to go hang out with your friends and your family. Instead of going on doing things you used to love, you're kind of backing off. And on top of that, that stress can really affect our emotions. That's that prefrontal causing damage to that can cause damage to our relationships. And we don't want to see that happening. But it's something good to realize at the same time. Maybe you're not the one feeling stressed, but you're noticing, your significant other, your family, your brother, your dad, your spouse, maybe someone along those lines is having some of these symptoms and signs that you're noticing, and you want to take, now that you're taking notice, you want to help them. And being able to, acknowledge that either for yourself or for others. So again, that throttle back on stress, John has wrote many articles and that can be great information to learn. We have lots of articles to help with that as well, talking about the physical, the brain, and the endocrine mechanisms. We can go all day on topics like that, but where are these levers and what do they kind of have to do with all of this? Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. There's no one lever to fix it all. There really are parts that we need to do to take control. Regaining some sense of control is key. Again, acknowledging that the sum is underlined. We can't control everything, but being able to accept the ones that we can. So you're probably wondering why there's a picture of rats on my slide. There was a study done back years ago that was with 300 lab rats. And you wouldn't be able to do this probably nowadays, but again, for the research and the science, these documents are out there and they're good information to kind of reflect upon. So the first group was a control, 100 rats. They were in a happy, healthy home, had nice cages, playmates, toys, anything you can think of, they had it. So they were the control group. The second group, they had the same type of home, people, the other rats are with them, all of that. But in their little home, they would get a shock randomly. So picture getting shocked by one of the cattle trainers in your barn, randomly getting shocked. So you can imagine how that was making them feel. There was nothing they could do, and it was just shocking them randomly. Whether they're sleeping or whatever. The third group had the same setup as the first and the second group with a happy home type atmosphere. The second group also would get electrical shocks through the floor, just like the second group, except this group would get a warning light. And with that warning light, they would have a button that they could press to stop it. Note it would not stop every time, but it would stop the shock from happening every single time it was supposed to happen. So you can imagine how they were kind of feeling. They kind of had some control. After they conducted this experiment, they dissected the rats and were able to find that the animals in the second group, as you can imagine, they had stomach ulcers, their brain was wasted away because of the cortisol and not having that control. Whereas that third group that had a little bit of control was actually very similar to that first group, control group of rats. So again, not the most nice thing to talk about, but it does give that kind of atmosphere that, if we have those constant stressors, it's really going to eat away at us from the inside out, basically. Not something we all want to think about, but it is something we need to think about. So we're making sure we're taking care of ourselves. So we need to find specific ways that we can regain control. So I'm not going to take the time for all of us to do this, but I am going to discuss it so you can do it on your own. So take a sheet of paper, take a paper plate, whatever you like. On one side, as an agricultural person, business, in my mind, every farmer is a business person because a farm is not just a farm anymore, it's a business. So write down, on one side of the paper, the things that really stress you out. What things are really hard to control, what just makes your hair stand up on the back of your neck, whatever it might be. And if you need a second plate, please feel free to reach out to Amanda and I or the project recovery team, and we can offer assistance. So now that you've got a few lists, take the time to circle all of the things that you can control, taking in mind that as much as we want to admit we wish we could control the weather, because I know that's probably one that's on everyone's list, especially during this time frame of severe cold. But looking at the things that you can control. And making sure to, give that understanding of I can control these things. These are the things I'm going to work on controlling. Then on the opposite side, write down 5 things that bring you joy, making sure that you can always have something that brings you joy. So very similar to project recovery in the sense of, doing something, recognizing those things. So I love the music that they brought up because that's totally me. I love having the music. I love taking my puppy for a walk. When I can be on a farm, I'm totally going to be in a farm. So I can agree with those statements. And again, making sure to focus on those. So don't get, why? I don't know. Okay. So when you're going through, make sure to take time to look at what your future plan is. And I don't know what is going on with my slide, so I apologize. All of my stuff is different than when I first looked at it, like an hour ago. So don't get caught in the trap of inaction and procrastination. Make a plan, set some goals. Like they were saying, do the SMART goals. Do some SMART goals so that you can work with individuals. And then being sure to reach out to individuals that you can use as resources. Some of those individuals might be your vet, your agronomist, your breeder, any individuals such as that you can work with on your plan. So utilizing them as best you can as well. Yes, here. So SMART goals, again, just like Project Recovery stated, specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time specified. So being able to have those to help kind of guide you as you go along. On the back side of your plate, you can utilize that, or on your paper, to be able to write down some SMART goals that you'd like to do. Again, if we had a little bit more time as we're getting close. So I'll kind of bring these up quickly for you to kind of review quick. So again, taking that time to really think about and think it through what your goals are, helping to decrease those chances of making a bad decision. Next, I just want to bring up to make sure that you're reaching out and speaking with your health professionals. Reach out, set up an appointment once a month or once a year with your doctor, making sure to have that check-in and making sure that you're doing all right. Your health is doing all right. The stress, like they were saying, can affect everybody in different ways, and they're still learning new ways that stress is affecting us as well. We really do need to take care of our brains. That's 3 pounds and it's 25% of our energy used. You can only imagine, the growing up, they always say to keep that hat on your head because it releases heat. Well, it's got a lot of work to do in there. It's telling our bodies what to do and keeping us going. Also, making sure that you fuel yourself. So taking the chance to give yourself good nutrition and keeping yourselves healthy in that fashion. We wouldn't just go down to the old underground fuel tank that was from the 1970s and fill our tractors up, and we shouldn't be doing the same with our bodies, fueling ourselves with candy and pop and things of that sort. We know sometimes during the stressful times of the year when we're trying to just get out in the fields and get it done, that we might not be eating the best, but making sure we're taking that time to really make sure that we're fueling ourselves for long sustainability. Lean proteins, fruits and veggies, and water. It's the old joke of if your pee isn't clear, it probably are not having enough water in your system during the day. So really making sure that you're getting enough water in you as well. They actually say that an apple a day can actually treat you just about as good as Mountain Dew can by giving you energy. So maybe next time, instead of reaching for that Mountain Dew, you can reach for an apple. Again, exercise, another great option. Check in with your doctors to make sure, if you have a back problem or things of that sort, learn some different exercises that might be better for you. We all have different situations going on with our bodies, so we want to check in and make sure we're treating them right. But again, even just getting that walk in a day is going to help. Meditation and mindfulness, another great one that they brought up. Meditation does not need to be you put on your yoga pants and go do yoga. Meditation can really be whatever makes you feel like you are recentered. So helping you gain that sense of control, doing breathing exercises. Just as Project Recovery mentioned, I have the same type of thing on my Fitbit even that does the breathing exercises. So really trying to take that opportunity. If you're looking for something, check out the Monkey Mind. It's a really neat YouTube, actually done by a monk, that can help bring that opportunity of a sense of calming. My personal way I enjoy it is actually getting out hunting, being out in a tree stand, out in the woods, out on a boat fishing. I really enjoy being in the outdoors in general. So just being anywhere that I can just be outside and enjoying it. Even in the bitter cold, I still enjoy getting out. So really taking time to find what works best for you. If it's sitting in a tree stand for a few hours in the middle of the cold, bundled up, hey, it works. Or again, being at the, being in nature, enjoying that opportunity as well is another one that I really enjoy. And then lastly, thinking about sleep. It's something that a lot of farmers overlook. We think we can handle it all, especially, we're up bright and early at the crack of dawn and we're going to bed late because we're checking cows still, or we're getting up in the middle of the night to go check cows or whatever it might be. We really do need to understand that we need sleep. It does help. Too much sleep can also be a problem, but a lot of times in our industry, we see that people are not giving themselves enough sleep. So that is important. Making sure that we're not utilizing caffeine, beer, wine, whatever it might be. That doesn't always help us sleep. That could actually affect our sleep and make it worse. So keeping those things in mind as well. So with that, thank you. I know it was a very brief, quick run through, but I want to be respectful of your time. Again, feel free to share any comments or questions with us. And then lastly, if you notice anyone that is showing signs of depression, anxiety, that you're concerned about, please feel free to jot down the National Suicide Prevention number that is on the screen right now. Also, be sure to reach out to your local resources, health professionals, clergy, and other individuals that may be of assistance. The Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection, the Farm Center, now has options for 24/7 hotline as well for individuals to be able to reach out to. And with that, I will take questions because I know that was a very quick, brief run through and my PowerPoint was acting up on me, so I apologize. Such is life. All right, well, if there's no questions, feel free to drop them into the chat or open your mic up and feel free to ask questions to Project Recovery, to Amanda, myself. We're more than happy to help answer questions. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and feel free to join us on our next session next month. We'll be talking about being healthy on the farm. So we'll be covering sleep and some other topics along those lines. So we really look forward to having you join us then.